Okay, so COVID-19 has thrown a huge spanner in our lives as we all know it. And overnight, businesses have found themselves thrown into an acute stage of emergency and upheaval, and they were forced to make quick decisions to enable continuity. Several months in, as we begin to move beyond the short-term measures and adapt to the new normal, it's imperative the businesses start to consider how they can adjust their strategies or models while remaining sustainable in this new era of living with COVID-19. And so the discussion must be had. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the virtual Accra SDG Investment Fair 2020. This session is on a post-COVID-19 vision of sustainable enterprises. My name is Amansa Aisi Ochre. I'm an enterprise development consultant with particular focus on SMEs. And my panelists are Cozy Yankee, who's Executive Director for NBSSI, and Yofi Grant, who's the CEO for GIPC. Welcome, Yofi and Cozy.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, very quickly, the purpose of this conversation is basically to understand what direction businesses should be looking at, given that we've gone through what I'm calling a bit of an upheaval with COVID-19 coming in unexpectedly and throwing us all off guard. So we want to understand where businesses, particularly from the Ghanaian perspective, should be going. And we're looking at the post-COVID. I don't know if the right word is post-COVID, because I think COVID has come to stay with us for at least quite a while. So we find, permanent solutions on how to deal with this health crisis. So post the emergency state of COVID, what do you think businesses should be considering? And I'll throw it out first to Cozy to give us a brief synopsis of what you think businesses should be looking at, especially within the Ghanaian context.
Oh, good afternoon once again. I think that COVID has brought a new normal, like we've been saying for many months now. And the importance of rephrasing or resetting how you view your business and how you do your business going forward cannot be overemphasized, because it's important for MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprises in Ghana, to really consider how they see their businesses and post-COVID, how they should be preparing themselves for growth and even sustainability. A lot of things that happened during the current phase of during the really intense part of COVID, and even a bit now at this moment, was really trying to stabilize a lot of the businesses, which was having to ensure that the businesses were not losing a lot of their productivity, and also losing their focus on what they were doing, trying to stabilize themselves, because this had never happened to them before, where there's lockdowns. So raw materials coming in was, reduced, even where they were selling their products, even in terms of investments coming in, everything else changed. And going forward and going into post-COVID, a lot of the things are going to remain the same. And so really for a lot of businesses, and even from government's point of view, is looking at how best to support these businesses that were sustained during the time of COVID to really accelerate in growth. And what would it take for that to happen? For that to happen, one is for them to really look at the way they do business differently. So which is, where are you selling? Back a few months ago, there were a lot of people traveling for international trade shows, a lot of people going to the markets or even selling in the shops. Then COVID happened, and going forward, realizing that we need to see how to bring digitalization at the forefront of everything that we do as businesses and everything we do as MSMEs. So that means that how do they create markets? How do they create a platform where they can sell their products? Where are the platforms? How do they ensure that their businesses are being sold on these platforms? How do they ensure that they are preparing their products to really sell on these platforms as well? So businesses need to be looking at that. Most importantly, businesses also need to look at accelerating the growth of their businesses due to the standstill or the stabilization of their businesses at this phase. So what would it take? What are the interventions or the business development services that could come in to provide that needed support? At NBSSI, one of our major programs, which we've always worked on in partnership with the Japanese, was what we call the Kaizen, which was continuous improvement. And one of the things we've realized during this era, and we also foresee going forward, is the importance of the implementation of this Kaizen continuous improvement in the businesses, and how best we can actually support a lot of them to translate this into growing the businesses, into accessing better funding, into accessing the needed support, into ensuring that it all aligns to what they do with all the things we hope to do with the SDGs as well. Then also, most importantly, is even access to finance. So for businesses going forward, is looking at what type of finance they need to be looking at. Where are we getting finance? Where are we going to get the type of investments that we need to propel and grow our businesses? Because if you take into consideration what government was doing through our partner or our sibling GIPC in bringing in investments for these businesses and for Ghana, and you also look at in terms of going forward and growing the businesses, they need to pay attention to how they're getting funding and support for their businesses. And so going forward from them post-COVID, it's paying attention to different revenue sources and different investment sources so that they'll be able to better support support their work and grow it. Because before COVID was AFTAC, we were talking about AFTAC, and now AFTAC is here with us. So how do they propel themselves post-COVID to be able to be a strong player with African Continental Free Trade, which is now here with us, which allows them to get them access to a market that they've never really had to do before. Also, post-COVID really allows them to see how do they formalize the businesses. Because when we look at the data that we've had, even during the COVID time, in terms of our interventions, it's all clear to all of us that up to 70 to 80% of Ghanaian businesses are micro, small, and medium enterprises. Out of that, 80% of them are in the informal sector. And when it came for time for intervention, we realized that being in the informal sector to a certain extent, a large extent, is disadvantageous. So as much as possible, going forward post-COVID, how do we strengthen this formalization processes that has been started by government and initiated by government so that they are really at a place where they can grow their businesses, where they accelerate, which is what we're looking at. So it's really important for us to do that. And government is going to play a very major role in supporting that formalization, so because it would benefit the work that we are doing and we hope to achieve going forward. So for a lot of businesses, as I mentioned, the four main things to really summarize it is looking at access to finance differently, looking at access to markets because digitalization comes in and supports us in a different way, looking at BDS support, which is business development support that allows them to really see how best it is that this acceleration process is really accelerated and gets them to the point and allows them to engage with all that government is doing with free trade, African Continental Free Trade, and a lot of different things that are available for them to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Cozy. I think that's a deep summary of what we're trying to discuss. I'll move it to you very quickly, Yofi, to give us your view of what post-COVID-19 era for businesses in Ghana especially should be looking at.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. And first of all, we need to even define when post-COVID will be, because that is the major challenge. We do not know where that will be. But it is very obvious and clear that things have changed forever. And as Cozy put it, there's a new normal. Whatever that new normal is, we are not even sure because we don't know whether our lives will ever be the same or not. But the new normal as it is right now is geared towards preserving lives and preserving livelihoods. And so even in ensuring that we reclaim the economy back after COVID or in the post-COVID era, this is the time to plan for it. And this is the time to put down the protocols that will ensure that you can reboot and restart the economy, which virtually was brought to a halt and a standstill by COVID. And even if it's been disruptive, find a way to make sure that the beneficiation of post-COVID is more widespread than has been before. And so in rebooting or resparking and re-engineering our lives to work again and make sure that the economy is brought back up, we have to look at what confronts us today. And so that has been dealt with. And in Ghana, we have actually put together the Ghana Cares program, which is the COVID Corona Alleviation and Revitalization of Enterprises scheme, which is a 100 billion cedi program that is broken into two main parts. The first part to ensure that we do not lose lives and we do not unduly suffer from livelihoods being lost. And then the second part is going forward, what are we going to do to bring our economy back to scratch? But on top of all this, like I said before, COVID has taught us one major lesson, that we can't do things in isolation. And that for global survival, we should be looking more at solutions which impact all of us. So whether it's a search for a vaccine or a cure, it must be one that embraces all humanity, because the nature of the virus is that if you actually create some remedy and you keep it only to yourself, it doesn't mean that you are safe, because people still carry the virus and people still interact and people still do business. So it opens the whole thing about regionalization, whether it's in investments or in business, looking at investments and business that have regional impact or connectivities of partnership and linkages. So that is one side. The other bit is then sustainable investment to make that happen. And sustainable investments are what perhaps for me is more interesting, such that investment opportunities do not just become projects, but become ongoing live activities that impact, like I said, the wider community and then the world. So even as we are looking at business going forward, what's the role of Africa in the whole global paradigm of business? And Africa still presents a very credible investment opportunity, first because it gives better returns and more, and research has proven that African returns has much less risk than was thought of. And Africans do pay their debts much more than some other regions of the continent. So the Africa risk is not as bad as it seemed. And therefore, one, those premiums that are added to Africa risk need to be eliminated. And such that we have fair, access to finance at the right pricing. So that in itself is very important. Secondly, the businesses that we're going to put out there are businesses that first will also enable us to recover. And in the COVID area, one thing we've learned in Ghana is that maybe with the disruption of global supply chains, there are things that we should look at doing. And in a Ghana Beyond Aid, we shouldn't be looking at accepting handouts and gifts as part of our development agenda, but to actually create partnerships and linkages with the sources of capital, sources of intellectual capital, sources of technology, and sources of life, so that we have a bigger pool of resources to tap into for mutual benefit. And so for me, that creates a more sustainable investment opportunity and source of capital than what we've had before. And that is one of the lessons we've learned from COVID. But then, of course, also elevate social capital and see how we can actually put investment into projects that affect the wider community, right from the top to the bottom. And not just for businesses, but actual communities. And in that sphere, we then go into what we would then call impact investment. And impact investment, therefore, looks at the broader range of the 17 SDGs and the impact that those investments make. Because if you look at the African paradigm or the African states, most of what we call SDGs are really our development agenda objectives and goals. For us, access to education, good health, housing, water are primary. And it's not about just improving the quality, it's also about the access. And if you look once again of the demography of wealth and poverty across the global landscape, I dare say that Africa harbors quite a significant proportion of the lower part of poverty. And therefore, SDG 1, eradicating poverty, not only becomes an African problem, but also a solution for global finance, for impact investment. So that in itself is a very important construct in the whole equation of investing and sustainable investment. But that also then takes us to the third arm, which is the private sector, the partnership with the private sector in achieving the SDGs. And I dare propose that we are going to see an evolution towards what I call the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line for any corporate, be it private or public, would show that it's important to first have profits split into three. The community in which you work or the constituency who patronize your goods and services, that's one. Two, the company that actually produces the goods and services. And three, the investors who put money into those goods and services. And once you have the triple bottom line approach, it augurs well for sustainability. The truth of the matter is that the private sector might have a totally different look at how they finance things than they did before, where it was just the monetary incentive and profits. They also want sustainability, because you want a business that you know is going to be there in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And therefore, sustainability becomes one of the very important aspects of a private sector business plan. How do we sustain the business? How do we get sustainable finance? And how do we achieve the objectives of a triple bottom line? So for me, that is where I see the world going to. And it's not just going to be regional, it's going to be global. We're going to see global businesses arise out of COVID-19 that embrace more partnerships and linkages that were there before.
Excellent. I think you touched on a few points that I wanted to raise in the conversation, particularly the fact that we have to start looking at the opportunities that COVID has presented to us, that out of the challenge that we've been facing. And one of the key things that I can see is a critical area is technology. So once we all found ourselves going through lockdown, you know, the companies who were far advanced with technology were able to adjust really quickly and continue. But we know that our small businesses, the SMEs, particularly on this side, have that technological challenge. So I want to understand, with all the measures that we put in place to support the SMEs to accelerate their growth, for instance, what is the emphasis on technology? What do you think we should be looking at? I'll put that to, Yofi looks excited. So I'll put that to Yofi first, and then,
Yes.
and then I'll ask Cozy to chime in.
I think that technology has become one of the very important enablers of almost all the things we've spoken about. And as we all know, because of lockdowns and close of borders, etc., technology became one of the new normals that meetings like we're having now, I'm sure if not for COVID, would have been facing each other, speaking, you know, eyeball to eyeball. But here we are. Technology has become the facilitator of certain things, and somehow it's brought about efficiencies of business operations. Whilst there are also cases where it's brought challenges, because human endeavors mean human interactions. It's not everything that can be done by a wire. If I have to eat, I can't eat through the computer. Must have the physical food brought to me. If I want goods from another part of the world that I need, those goods need to travel the land and seas to get here. I can't send them by technology. So there's a real physical world that will always prove a challenge but an opportunity. But technology can bring about efficiencies in facilitating all these supply chains. And we've seen that happen with COVID. And so technology is going to be there, I think, and many people have this fear that technology is going to replace human endeavors. But like I said, if you have to eat, you have to eat the physical food. You can't eat technology. There's so much technology can do. Certain things are going to still be there. And those things are going to be made easier by technology. So for example, we want to send goods somewhere, we want to send blood to some corner somewhere on the land that is not accessible by cars. We use drones. We need to measure temperatures in other places in the world. which affect what we do here. We use drones. We are using mobile phones to transact our businesses. I remember right after the lockdowns were open and I was at home working, almost everything I acquired was acquired using my mobile phone. I didn't have to step out. So because I use a car that uses petrol, I'm actually cutting down on carbon emissions because I stayed home and I was able to acquire all the things I got. But of course, for the delivery of those goods, I need a motorbike or delivery system had to do it. So we only lessened carbon footprints by using technology, which is another major issue. But definitely, for me, efficiency is one of the key objectives that technology brings to us.
So rightly so, technology should augment the human capacity, but not necessarily eliminate the human capacity. But Cozy, you deal with a lot of small businesses, and we know that the ease of phones to do the work that we have to do, or even the internet access, is difficult for some of them in the rural spaces to even have that. And do you have any measures in place to support these small businesses in that direction?
Sure. I think that one of the things that this whole new era brought was the importance of technology and the innovation that it comes with. And most of our MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprises across the nation that we work with, some have, or majority of them have very limited access or ability with technology. However, we realized in this period and going forward the importance of that technology. And even during this period of the coronavirus pandemic, when the president announced his CAP business support scheme to be able to support the micro, small, and medium enterprises, it was really important for us to use technology. Because one, the world has changed and had changed at that time. So you couldn't, converge at the same place, and you couldn't have large numbers of people. So people didn't have a choice but to be able to use technology for them to be able to assess the financial tools or the financial needs that they had. Really, technology was supposed to really help with financial inclusion, to be able to build them and get them more access. Through the process, we realized that majority of Ghanaians were really unbanked. And out of the 800,000 people that we had seen on our platforms applying for the government stimulus package, upwards of 70% of them did not really have formal bank accounts, which meant that for financial inclusion to be strong and solid, technology was the way. And so using the mobile monies and other platforms was more accessible to them than anything else. So indirectly, the way we did business, the way MSMEs across the nation, be it rural or urban, technology was playing a very important role. And it was important for us, like Yofi mentioned, for efficiency was key, productivity in the way they did their businesses and work, and they understand the need of that going forward. The financial inclusion, which I mentioned, accessibility, because if we were going to get to everyone across the nation, not going digital or not using technology was not going to help us achieve that. And so for the MSMEs, yes, we saw that there was a stumbling block, but they tried to overcome that stumbling block by using technologies in our offices about how do you ensure that you have access to markets that we never used to have in the past. And so for a lot of people that we were working with, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, even in rural areas, technology, platforms for access to markets was key. It came with its challenges, because the networks had their own challenges. People might not have the right Android tools to be able to utilize the way they would have wanted to, and so many other things. But they've realized the importance of technology and the need to really see how best we can bridge that gap. And at the National Board for Small Scale Industries, one of government's main intervention and tool is digitalization. And I think at this point, it really comes to the fore, the importance of that. And we're working with a lot of MSMEs to really digitalize their businesses, to get them to be able to sell and access tools that they've never really been able to on platforms. And so a major campaign in working with them to bring this up is really important. And we're working on this and seeking other partners to make sure that reutilize technology, because we believe here that in using this technology, we'll be able to bridge some of the goals of the SDGs that we all talk about, even as we sit here to talk now, in being able to use technology for even goal number 9, which applies to us, to build resilient infrastructure so that we can promote the inclusivity and sustain industrialization like we've spoken about and continue to talk about, and use that same technology to also reduce inequality, which is even within Ghana. And it's amazing the inequality that technology, not having technology, brings, which is also, if you're looking at it internally, think about what is happening externally. So the importance of all of that, which is dear to us at NBSSI, are some of the 2 most critical SDGs that we really ascribe to, that we work towards, that at the end of the day, we'll be able to use technology to support our MSMEs to bridge some of the gap of inequality.
So another thing that becomes very apparent with this whole crisis is the human capacity, the investment that employers, for instance, or business people have to make for their workforce. So health was a critical thing. I mean, I think Ghana was, we can perhaps call ourselves a little bit fortunate in the sense that we didn't bear the biggest brunt of what is happening globally when it comes to our human force. But imagine that happened on this end. I can see that our businesses are not all in a space to provide health support, health insurance to their workforce, and you know, outside of the workforce, you know, your business it's not going to function. The government has put in short-term measures to support that, but how do we ensure that moving into the long term, the businesses have that component in their strategy to ensure that their workforce has some kind of health insurance? Can you speak to that, Yofi?
Well, it's a very important construct in the new normal. So first of all, to ensure that lives are saved, and then once lives are saved, they can think of the livelihood question as well. And so any system that should guarantee that people have access to primary health care and access to medical care if the need be is important enough looking forward. And we saw how exposed many of our health systems were with COVID. And even at the best of intentions and the best of systems, the world still came to its knees with COVID. But like you did say, for some very good reason or divine intervention or whatever it may be, we're not hit as badly as other places. In fact, Ghana's records are amazing if you compare to other places, even within the region. Our mortality rate is, thankfully, although unfortunate, relatively low. Our recovery rates are very high, and we are seeing infections sort of taper off, and also that we have a huge constituents of asymmetric symptoms with COVID. Asymptomatic symptoms that are there with people who have been infected. So, you know, the most important thing is that we have access to care that can be paid for. And so health insurance is going to be very important. And you know, in Ghana, the real direction is universal health access and care. And with the national health insurance system that has been put in place, that is the objective. But there's also private sector impact with insurance that can help cover where the state cannot. And so that is a very important part of the puzzle going forward. But we hope, but like life has always been, the world has always recovered from the pandemics, whether it was the Spanish flu, the bubonic plague. Life has to go on, and we have to ensure that with every successive force majeure of this nature, the world gets better at handling it and preventing the loss of lives, etc., etc. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I think.
Sorry, I think we got cut off somewhat. Okay. Sorry, I think I missed the last few points that Yofi was making, but I gather, I gather the few points. But what I wanted to get a bit more clarity on is we are going to open our borders. They're already open in the aviation space, and we're going to see the interaction of people coming into the country, and there's no telling what that effect that's going to have on us health-wise. But are we looking at the government can't continue to prop the country up when it comes to health? They put in measures, and we have some funds to support this area. But what are we asking the business community to do? What are we looking at, especially the larger companies, to do right. To ensure that there is that buffer zone for people should we find ourselves in a critical stage health-wise?
And you made a very important point, which we need to highlight, that the impact of the private sector definitely is critical as well, because the state cannot forever cushion it. And in Ghana, there is a situation where the private sector rallied around to build a 100 million cedi fund, and which went into building the first infectious disease center privately built in Ghana. And it's added to the stock of medical facilities to look at infectious diseases. But I added, and what I ended was that even in insurance, the private sector can play a massive role in providing financing for healthcare. But as we open the borders, and the borders will open, I mean, countries are opening their borders. And even as we head, whether organically or inadvertently or constructively into herd mentality, life has to go on. People have to go back to work. Kids have to go back to school. We can't allow life to come to a standstill. And so in many airports that you go to, you'd find that there's been setups to first test and then give treatment for people who come in who are infected, but also to create another level of security where we can work together from country to country to nip the virus in the bud. In fact, most airlines will not allow you on the flight unless you have a certificate to show that you are negative. But even that, having said that, when the borders were open in Ghana and some traveled in, 6 people were found to be positive with the virus out of quite a couple of hundreds. But they're asymptomatic, but they're still going to be treated. And then that in itself would be a positive step forward in making sure that the disease is not carried from one country to the other.
Okay, so another thing that's critical when we're talking about sustainable businesses, we've talked a bit about the people and what it.
Oops.
We can't hear you. Your phone is on.
Oh, sorry. So we've talked about the people aspect of when it comes to sustainable businesses. We've looked a little bit at the profit angle as well in terms of, I want to delve a bit deeper into the environment, because like Yofi earlier mentioned, with us being at home during lockdown, we could clearly see the impact of our influence on the environment, reducing our carbon emissions, etc. And this is an area that businesses in Ghana, especially small businesses, haven't really inculcated in their businesses. And I want to understand if we have a strong agenda in that direction, because we obviously have to encourage it. It's affecting us greatly, and internally, what are we doing to drive the reduction in the climate change area? Kosi, can you speak a little bit to that? I think we've lost Kosi.
Hello?
Hello? Okay, so we lost Kosi a little bit. Yeah,
so
there we go.
I think, Amy. Okay, all right, great. So I just wanted to say that, I mean, there's so much that we are doing to ensure, yes, you mentioned sustainability. We've talked about the human capital aspect, but then we also need to look at sustainability in different aspects, in terms of the emissions, in terms of, which is carbon emissions, in terms of waste, and a whole lot of things. And one of the things I mentioned initially when we spoke about was this partnership and development we had done with the Japanese government in terms of Kaizen, which meant continuous improvement. And one of the main things that it did, which we've been trying to roll out for a lot of SM businesses across Ghana, was really continuous improvement, really looking at productivity, which looked at waste reduction and trying to ensure that you're able to reduce your waste and relate it to profitability. So when you're looking at a lot of the micro, small, and medium enterprises, and you're trying to explain to them the concept of sustainability beyond their business growth, you need to highlight to them how it also aligns with profitability and how it ensures that they continue to do business. And so it takes a lot of education, which we're looking at doing to support that. We've also had other interventions where we work with businesses closely to see how their reporting is done differently to ensure that they're taking into consideration sustainability issues that we've talked about that really is in alignment with SDGs. So at the National Board for Small Scale Industries and Government Interventions, a lot of this comes to play. And also wanting to really tie it into the conversation that UFE had spoken about in terms of insurance and that you had asked. Insurance is so key and important that it even goes beyond healthcare. And so with COVID hitting and coming in place, really businesses need to look at insurance from a whole new dynamic, not as to ensure their business, their health, the health of their employees, but their own businesses, their stocks, the products, and all of that, so that we'll be able to ensure that when pandemics or something happens that deviates from the normal, we'll be able to be sustainable at the end of the day beyond only human capital.
I think we're at the point where we have to wrap up a little bit. I would have liked to delve into a few more things, but I think it will come up in the question and answer space. So just to wrap up, you know, the conversation post-COVID, I think I'll eliminate the word post-COVID because post it's an era that's come to stay, to be honest. So post-emergency state of that we were thrown into, where we're looking at businesses needing to reconsider their sustainable agenda and look at how they impact their communities, look at how they impact the environment, and access the and look at the access opportunities that we're giving them in terms of government support to them. So thank you so much to Yofi, CEO for GIPC, and Kozi, the Executive Director for NBSSI. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you all.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. You'll notice on your screen that there is a poll for you to, if you could kindly just make the poll indicate so we know who is in the room with us. It will give us a better idea of who we're talking to and how we can best answer your questions efficiently. It should only take you about 30 seconds, and then we will go straight to question and answer with Yofi Grant and Kozi Yankee Aye. Just confirm that I have Yofi on online.
You do.
And oh, excellent. And I also have Kozi online.
Yes, you do.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you all for filling our little poll. It's clear that we have government officials as a majority with us, 37%. We have 17% of entrepreneurs online with us at the moment. That's excellent because this is really addressing your concerns. And it's dropped even lower from Bennett's time, 2% of the media. I'm hoping that it's masquerading in other professions out there. Okay, thank you so much. We'll move straight into the questions, and there's quite a number, obviously, they're in the chat. I'll ask everybody to please put your questions in the chat, and we'll endeavor to answer it all within the 15 minutes that we have. We had a few questions that also came in via email earlier on for those who registered, and so we will endeavor to answer those as well. But I'll go in very quickly with a quick introduction of my panelists again, for the purpose of those who might have just joined us. So speaking to the post-COVID-19 vision of Sustainable Enterprise is Yofi Grant, who's the CEO of GIPC, and Kozi Yankee Aya, who is Executive Director for the National Board for Small Scale Industries, NBSSI. Thank you to you both. The first question goes to Yofi, and it's from Kofi Ankama Asamoah. And he's saying, thanks, Mr. Yofi Grant, for revealing Africa is not as risky as was thought. That should make Africa a more interesting investment arena. Please, how can Africa leverage on that to reduce cost of capital and also attract more capital?
Interesting question. It's a question that I even ask because there is a situation that sometimes I can't rationalize, because if we agree, and it's not just Africa saying so, it's from academia and those who have researched it, who agree that African risk is less than in other areas of the world, then first of all, there is no good reason why there is such a huge risk premium put on borrowing in Africa and capital coming to Africa, because the risk is lower. So I think it's also an issue of we being able to tell our story and tell it the right way, because there are many people who also still think that Africa is still the dark continent, as was described a decade or so ago. But Africa has changed. There are less coup d'etats, less situations of uprisings, and a lot more cases of constitutional governance. And beyond that, there's also a lot more delivery on the economic side. So if you look at the 10 fastest growing countries over the past 10 years, 6 or 7 are from Africa. So that definitely tells a different story. But then, of course, having said that, then there are still some remnants of bureaucracies, bureaucratic practices to business. And sometimes you get the feeling that governments are anti-business, whereas governments should be working with business. But being able to attract the business, the private sector businesses into governance and also into the economy makes it a better risk to manage. In any case, the use of government entities to de-risk investments are still key. And also the demonstration effect of pooled funds from insurance and social security and all that, investing in development is also key. What we've seen in the past is that a lot of pension money goes into lending to the state, whereas it could actually go to development because it's long-term capital, and it will also help de-risk some of those investments for private sector. So those are all elements that will make the cost of borrowing, the cost of doing business in Africa lower. But there are other structural issues. For example, infrastructure. There's governance as well. Infrastructure and governance are key. There's energy, which is also key. And then I think that perhaps the more attractive situation today is the fact that there's a continental free trade area, which would be the largest tariff-free trade zone since the WTO. And so I believe that the next decade is Africa's decade. I mean, and doubtlessly. But we need to also work on some of these reforms to ensure that we have an attractive business and investment climate, and we have one that would enable us all build wealth without encumbrances and hindrances. So I believe that Africa will be the next investment destination. But how we execute our governance, how we execute our infrastructure, such that you can move across the continent without obstructions, are some of the key issues that you need to work on to bring down the cost of capital and doing business here. It's all about reforms.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So Kozi, this is a question that's come up ever since we started putting out that this session was going to happen. Everybody wants to know, your outfit is currently giving out loans to SMEs affected by COVID-19. This is locally in Ghana. I want to say a very big thank you to the government and your outfit for the support. My question is, what next? After giving these monies to these SMEs, what are we doing to ensure they utilize the monies judiciously and that they're able to pay back? This is from Sharif Gali from the Ghana Chamber of Youth Entrepreneurs.
Sure, thank you very much. And I think that there are a lot of things that government has put in place to ensure that we see the strengthening of the businesses, to see that the businesses accelerate in growth. Because we're at a very interesting time in the lives of the businesses and in actually the whole ecosystem support for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So really in the design of the implementation for the CAP business support scheme, one of the main things we looked at was how do we strengthen and push a formalization of the informal sector and the businesses that existed in the country. Because if you look at the data and the numbers, 80% of the businesses are in the informal sector. So as much as possible, through the CAP-BAS business support program, we're able to help support in the formalizing the informal, and we hope to continuously do that for majority of the businesses. Besides that, we're also looking at how do we provide them with technical assistance support, because we realized that it wasn't only about funding or access to funding, but there was also the challenge of providing the needed supports, be it capacity development, supporting them beyond the recovery phase to make them more resilient. And so various training and capacity development programs are being designed. Some have been designed, and starting from next week, we shall actually engage the various associations, the members, to ensure we provide them with the needed support going forward. It's also important for us to note that besides the access to funding and the BDS support, as I had mentioned in my presentation, is the support in really providing access to markets for majority of the businesses that we work with or have even advanced funding to. Because we also noticed that the way we do business, the way we sell has changed. And so the National Board for Small Scale Industries, which is an agency under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and it's a government agency, is very working closely with government to ensure that we provide the requisite tools and the skills and the funding to propel the businesses beyond this era. Because after this, there's so much more for the businesses to look forward to. And then there's also African continental future, which they have to be prepared for, to be able to engage with the rest of Africa and go beyond Ghana. Thank you.
So I think the crucial thing is that people are wondering if this is one of the things that government does in election year and doesn't really follow through with it. So what are the monitoring and evaluation aspects to the CAP program? And how are you going to ensure that the entrepreneurs who are giving this money are actually using it for survival purposes and are going to be putting in measures to remain sustainable?
As you're aware, we have 185 business advisory centers across the nation, and these business advisory centers provide support to businesses, to entrepreneurs within the district setting. And so as much as possible, the work we are doing does not end at the head office level. And so for most of the work we've been doing is really collating the data of the beneficiaries. The data is then sent to our districts level offices so that they can follow up with them, support them to build the businesses that exist within the districts, monitor and evaluate them, and going beyond just the funding as I had mentioned. So going from next week, providing with capacity development as well so that they know that we continue to handhold them and will continue to engage them beyond the access to funding. It's important to know that this is work that NBSSI has been doing. So it goes beyond an election year. It goes beyond now. And so for the past 3 years, since I started working at NBSSI, the goal of us and our work with our district offices has been to really advance access to finance, which we've been able to do. So prior to the CAP-BAS, we've actually facilitated within the 3 years upwards of 45 million Ghana cedis in access to funding for various businesses on the district level. And we did not leave them there, so we don't intend to do the same with the CAP business support. We intend to go beyond that and then work closely with associations as well and get them involved. So we're working at strengthening those associations to be able to work through them, work with them to build the capacity of the various MSMEs across the nation.
Okay, so that's encouraging to know. Yofi is, we spoke a little bit about the African Free Trade, and somebody is asking, Mr. Yofi, Trans-Africa Railway Corporation Limited is about to build a high-speed rail connecting capitals in Africa, starting 2021. What impact does this have on the SDGs, and how prepared is the GIPC and Government of Ghana in propelling this endeavor?
Absolutely critical and important for the achievement of the SDGs, especially the advent of the CFTA. As you know, the CFTA provides the biggest trade bloc. And if you look at current Africa intracontinental trade, it's somewhere a shade below 18%, whereas intra-Africa investment is even less, at below 5%, as compared to the 65% that you'd find in Europe. But one of the key issues is connectivity. How are we connecting with each other as countries? I can tell you it's more difficult for me to go to the Congo or Mozambique from Accra than it is to go to London or Paris because I have direct flights there and I can get in there. We even have a situation where to travel within Africa from one country to the other, you need visas. But once we are connected and we have access to each other in a structured way where there's mutuality of the benefits, definitely this is a project worth supporting and finding investments for. And it's just not the railway. I know in West Africa, we have the Trans-West Africa Highway, which is supposed to start all the way from Nigeria right across to Senegal and beyond. So these are some of the initiatives that I believe will open up the space in achieving the SDGs, because once you open up and people can reach each other and they can access countries, then you are creating bigger and better opportunity and making it easier to achieve some of those goals. So I dare say that it's definitely a notably positive development to happen and requires the capital to make it happen. And as I did mention earlier, infrastructure is important, very important in reaching some of the deprived communities that are also developed, and being able to link them such that they become one homogeneous business entity. This is required.
Okay, so we have another question. It's directed at you, Cozy, but I think it also speaks to what we're talking about in terms of what we spoke about in terms of looking to ourselves internally and having to ramp up our, manufacturing to satisfy it internally, because obviously with COVID, we found ourselves borders all shut and export trade wasn't as smooth as it would have been before. But somebody's asking, what opportunities exist for small and micro businesses in Northern Ghana to work towards formalization? I guess the stronger we make our small businesses, the easier it will be for them to trade.
Yes, it is. I think that by formalizing it provides you with access. And a lot of the work we've been doing in the past few days has focused on access and providing the needed support to the businesses. Across the nation, we have all sorts of programs in every region in this nation and in 185 districts. And the northern part of Ghana has not been left out and will not be left out. I think, as I've mentioned, accessibility is at the core of the work we do. And so a few months ago, we actually initiated the formalization of the informal business program with support from the Rural Enterprises Program, IFAD, as well, where we were supporting businesses to formalize. And so across the nation, there was some form of formalization program, be it the need to get access to regulatory support, be registrar generals, certify their products, get the rights needed materials for formalization. We provided the needed financial support for them. We continue to do that through our other interventions. And as I mentioned, in the northern parts of Ghana, we have a regional office in all the regions, in Savannah, in Northern Ghana, Upper East, Upper West, and then we also have district offices across. So as much as possible, once they reach out to the business advisory heads or even to the regional offices, the needed support and attention will be given to them to formalize their businesses.
Okay, so we have a question from Peter Akwabo. How can we convince credit rating agencies that Africa remains attractive? I guess you'll feel be the best person to answer this question.
How do we ensure that African countries remain attractive? I think the first thing is, for most investors, one of the first things they want to know is stability and predictability. So of course, there must be political stability. Then secondly, there must also be economic stability. That means that people want to see a macro that points the right directions and you have economic stability. Once you get that, then you can further push for growth. And most investors also want growth markets. Post-COVID, there needs to be a lot of recovery. Many companies were shut down and they need to retool and get back to the market. New markets are going to open up. And as Africa comes to the CFTA, that will be a very attractive market, actually a market waiting to happen, because 60% of that population will be below the age of 35. It's a huge consumer market waiting to happen. But definitely political stability is essential. Macroeconomic stability and growth is also essential. And as I mentioned before, 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world over the past 10 years have been from Africa. But then, of course, we also need to look at the legal frameworks and the regimes within which we do our businesses, and in there are still significant challenges that require significant reform. We've seen many countries in Africa reform significantly. For example, Togo last year, in the ease of doing business, jumped up 40 hoops out of a significant number of reforms they did to their business sector to allow it to be more attractive in terms for investors. In Ghana, we are also engaged in a project to also review our status in the ease of doing business rankings, but more so to ensure that we can build an economy towards the great aspirations of our president of making Ghana the best place to do business in Africa in the medium to long term. So those are important facts of the matter that need to be dealt with. But there is still...
Sorry, not to interrupt, Yofi. Sorry, I'm told we have just about a minute and we have to wrap up.
Okay.
But I think you're making a valuable contribution there. Nevertheless, we have touched on it a bit during the entire discussion, so I hope that the answer is clear for Peter. And I apologize to the others whose questions we didn't get to. From the some of the questions that came through we were unable to answer, but they have all been touched in the But I'd have to wrap up now and say thank you very much to Yofi and thank you very much to Kobe. And I'll hand it back to Jerry to complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.